It is certainly not a topic people enjoy talking about. As a matter of fact, I visit around for various churches when I'm not speaking somewhere to listen to this preacher or that preacher because I love to learn. And it's kind of amazing to me that very seldom do I actually hear anybody talk about sin. You say, oh, here we go, hellfire and brimstone. You're going to tell us how wicked and bad we are. No, I figure that if you are a sinner, you already know that. And if you're not a sinner, I don't know how I can convince you that you are. I do know this, though, that nobody is perfect. We're all flawed, every single one of us. And that occasionally we do things that are wrong. Now, I've been talking about the devil for the previous episodes, and so some people would say, well, if I do something wrong, then the devil made me do it. They tempted me. It's not my fault. I just yielded to the temptation Satan put in front of me. So blame it on him. Don't blame it on me. There's a passage in James chapter 1, beginning in verse 13. It says, let no one say when he's tempted, I'm being tempted by God. For God cannot be tempted with evil, and he himself tempts no one. But each person is tempted when he's lured and enticed by his own desire. Then when desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin, and sin, when it's fully grown, gives birth to death. Now, that passage is kind of scary. Let me tell you why I have such an emotional attachment to it. Way back when I was a freshman in college, so this was a long time ago, I went to a small Christian university. It's not that small now, but it was back then. Back then, it only had 200 students. Now it has thousands. But back in those days, only 200 students, and it was just a 2-year college when I first went there. And there were another 2 years for people that wanted to major in Bible. And so we had some of the Bible majors there that were in the 3rd and 4th year, but most of the students were like me in the 1st and 2nd year. I didn't realize when I went there that I was going to be surrounded by Christian stormtroopers. That's exactly where they were. I'd only become a Christian the December before. And so I hadn't been a Christian very long, and therefore didn't have some of the learning that they had, some of the, if you'll forgive the word, indoctrination that they had, and therefore they thought I was some kind of a heathen, and I became a mission project. A mission project? Yeah. You see, I still thought that, a Christian could dance and I'd go to hell. Things like that. And so I became a project. And some of the girls in the girls' dormitory decided they were going to convert me to a better level of Christianity. Back in those days, we didn't have that wash and put on stuff. You had to iron everything. I wasn't yet ready to learn how to iron my own clothes. And so I convinced some of the girls in the girls' dormitory to iron my clothes for me. I'd take them to the washateria, dry them, bring them back, and they'd iron them. I thought it was my charm that got the girls to iron my clothes for me. It turned out it was not my charm. It was the fact that I was their mission project. And so what they would do is they would type scriptures. The Bible we were using back then mostly was the King James Version of the Bible. They would type scriptures from the King James Version and on little slips of paper and put them in my pockets. And so if I got a shirt back, I'd have a scripture right here in the pocket. If I got a pair of pants back, I had 4 scriptures in the 4 pockets. I mean, I was a walking Bible. They never mentioned any of them. They never said, do you know what that verse means? They never said, would you sit down and study with us? They never did any of those things. They were trying to convert me through osmosis. Put the scripture on it somewhere and somehow it'll get inside it. You say, what's that got to do with this passage? Well, back in those days, it was Montgomery, Alabama, where I was in school. Back in those days, a state fair came to Montgomery. And back in those days, they still had a show that they quit having a few years after that, where you could pay $1 and go inside and watch some women disrobe. A hoochie coochie show, I think they called it back then. Well, the fair was coming to town. And some of the older guys, the Bible majors, came into my room one night and said, Brother Beam, you're not allowed to go to the fair by yourself. Why not? They said, because gambling's a sin, and you're the kind of guy that probably gamble for one of those stuffed zebras. Therefore, you can't go. And so they assigned, if I were going to go, I had to have a chaperone. And so they assigned Charlie from Hueytown, Alabama, to go with me. Now, he was a freshman just like I was, but he was a Bible major, and so I was assigned to be with Charlie the whole time at the fair so that I would not gamble for a stuffed zebra and lose my soul. Well, Charlie and I are both miserable. He's miserable because I won't go on any rides with him because I'm mad. I'm miserable because even though I didn't want one before then, I'm now craving a stuffed zebra. So we come around one of the corners of this fair, and there was a stage there, and there was a guy with a microphone. Of course, back then all the microphones had wires on them. A guy on the microphone, and behind him were a few young women who were winking and wriggling. And Charlie, being from Hueytown, had never heard of such. And he looked at me and he said, "What they gonna do in there?" So I saw my opportunity to educate a Bible major. So I told Charlie what they were going to do in there. He said, "In front of people?" I said, "That's why it costs $1. You have to pay to go see it." And he said, "A Christian wouldn't go to a place like that." I said, "Yeah, you're right." He said, "Have you ever been?" I said, "Charlie, I just became a Christian back in December. Anything I did before then was washed in the blood." "Have you ever been?" Yeah, back in the day." He said, "We shouldn't go." And I said, "You're absolutely right." Then he looked down one way, down the midway, and then the other way down the midway, and looked at me and said, "Let's go." I said, "Charlie, I'm surprised at you." He said, "Well, hey, how can I preach against it if I don't know what it is?" We were two 18-year-olds. And so I thought to myself, look, if my chaperone's going in there, I have no sin if I follow him. I'm just following the guy they sent to lead me to where I should go. And so I'm thinking, I get to go to this, and I'm not going to feel guilty because it's Charlie's fault. So Charlie reached in his pocket, pulled out a dollar bill, and handed it to the guy. And I pulled out what I thought was a dollar bill. It was one of those scriptures the girls had put in my pocket. And it was this particular verse from the King James Version, but this particular verse, that a person's tempted when they're drawn away of their own lust and enticed. And when it's full grown, it leads to death. Now, I didn't know what that meant, but I knew if lust and death were somehow connected, I was in trouble. So I looked at Charlie and I said, "Charlie, I can't go." He said, "Why not?" I said, "Because I found this scripture in my pocket." He said, "Well, don't show it to me." So I didn't. Charlie made his dollar and went in and watched the Hoochie Coochie show. He came out about 45 minutes later, and there I stood holding a stuffed zebra. Well, I don't guess it was the best night for either one of us. But you see what that passage is telling us? It's telling us that it's our own lust that leads us away.